Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. He is the dean, the king. Do you have any other, the emperor of trade grades? Do you have a specific one that you've been given over the years? The man with the trade grades?
I guess guru of trade grades?
Guru. Oh, that's good. That's excellent. The guru of the trade grades, Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. So, Kevin, let's dive right in because I feel like you have been kinder to the Wizards than a lot of folks around your grades for this. I tend to agree with you. I'm guessing for similar reasons, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think it was B- you gave the Wizards for this grade. Why did you give that grade, and what did you make of the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are grading sort of the process that led here to all of this. The fact that the Wizards, did not trade Bradley Beal a couple of years ago, gave him this massive 5-year extension with the only no-trade clause in the NBA, allowing him to control these negotiations and, limiting their options in terms of where to send him. So if you factor all of that process in, yeah, I agree the grade is much worse, but that's not the position we're starting in. They don't have a time machine to go back to last year and change that decision. So once you started from the point of having Bradley Beal in this contract on your books, having a team that evidently needed to get younger and rebuild because of the fact that it was going to be very difficult to retrofit this team into a contender around an aging Bradley Beal. In that context, I think moving on from him at this point made sense. The one question that, I was left with in terms of the B- is it possible that the Miami Heat would have gone further if something happened between now and, say July 1st that, convinced them that Damian Lillard was not going to be an option for them? Because it does seem like the potential availability of Lillard loomed over this negotiation from Miami's standpoint.
Yeah, that's the thing that struck me, Kevin, is why did this happen on Sunday before the draft? Even if you wait till Thursday, make them sweat it out. And the potential answer could have simply been Beal decided he wanted to go to Phoenix. His wife's from California. She definitely has a big say in this. It's a family, right? They've got 3 kids. Where they want to live was part of the reason Brad wanted the no trade clause. He wanted to live in DC. He realized professionally that was not an option for him. So he talks to his family and they make a decision. They're adults like the rest of us in that way. It just so happens that they, the guy with the $250 million contract happens to play professional basketball. But that is the biggest question for me is why did this happen now? And the only answer I can come up with, and it does seem based off some of the reporting this is potentially the case, is that Beal said no, it's Phoenix, and at that point there's no leverage at all for Washington. At that point the grade is the shrug emoji, not any kind of letter.
Well, the other aspect of it is, look, if Phoenix is the case, it doesn't kind of matter, how high Miami offers if you'd rather make the Phoenix deal, because Phoenix can't offer anything more. There was nothing left on the table unless you wanted DeAndre Ayton, which I don't think the Wizards probably ultimately did as they started this rebuilding process.
Right. If they had made, let's pretend for a second the Miami deal is an option for them. If they make the trade, it's Beal for Lowry, Duncan Robinson, and a couple of first-round picks. What is the trade grade for you then, knowing that apparently wasn't an option? So we're putting that caveat. Michael Winger, Will Dawkins, do not get mad at me, but just what kind of difference in return are we talking about here?
Yeah, I think that's in the A range to at least get a couple of first-round picks. I mean, you would potentially with Duncan Robinson have to take on a little bit more salary beyond this year. I mean, I think that's the other element of this trade from the Wizards' standpoint. Landry Shamet, functionally an expiring contract with no guarantees beyond this year. Chris Paul, obviously, in the last year of his contract. It's maximum cap flexibility for them. And, that's surely going to be used, whether it's in a Chris Paul trade, whether it's next summer, actually using cap space, taking on bad contracts from other teams to try to accumulate draft picks. This is the playbook. We know how it's done at this point.
Yeah, Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com with us. I do want to get to your Suns trade grade because that's honestly, if I wasn't doing radio in Washington, D.C., I would spend all day talking about what the hell are the Suns doing. So we will get there, but because I am doing radio in Washington, D.C., let's continue on the Wizards for a little bit. What does the path look like now? Because the idea of having a ton of cap space sounds great. That only works if LeBron James decides he wants to leave Cleveland and you are the Miami Heat. There's not a lot of precedent for in their prime superstars leaving, signing with a new place. There's none and them signing with the Washington Wizards. So how do you then use that cap space to acquire the assets to acquire players in the non-superstar wants to play here way? What is Michael Winger and Will Dawkins? What are they building now?
Yeah, I mean, look, Will Dawkins came from Oklahoma City. Michael Winger was there before they went through this process, but Oklahoma City is an extreme version of this because they were able to kind of trade their guys at the right time and get a historic return for Paul George, given the situation of him going to the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard also going there. A great return for Russell Westbrook where he was. They did the version of what Washington didn't do 2 years ago in terms of trading Westbrook at the right time, just sort of on accident. And that set them all up with all these draft picks. But then they kept using the expiring contracts, the cap space they had. It was Al Horford for a year and got a first round pick, and then traded him to Boston and got a first round pick on the other end of that. It was Kemba Walker, taking him back in that second Horford deal with Boston. A number of guys like that. We could go through other examples, but each time you're accumulating draft picks along the way. And look, individually, none of those might be that valuable, but if one of them hits, if it's the right protections, that can be a massive swing for everything. And then B, it's just accumulating those picks, and Oklahoma City has used them to, last year they pulled together several of the picks, including the one that they had from the Wizards that they had gotten via Houston from the John Wall deal, and sent those to New York and ended up getting the number 12 pick, a lottery pick out of it. So, that's kind of the philosophy of the playbook going forward, I think, for the Wizards.
Yeah, and so you take on the bad contracts. You do that with first-round picks. Most of the time, though, that's going to come from teams that are giving you future picks or teams that are not giving you super high picks. What's kind of the NBA standard, if you will, of projecting out, right? Like if you want to pick swap with the Suns in 2029, like are the Wizards expecting by 2029 for the Suns to not be good because all these guys will be old and gone? Like, when you talk about some of the Nets picks with Phoenix, like how far out do teams try to plan this stuff to think like, hey, that pick actually might be valuable versus if we got it this year and we know we're going to get the 28th pick and, at that point, what's, is it more valuable to go in the future? Because also like, I think Winger and Dawkins will be here for a long time. I think the only way they're not is if Dawkins gets another job because they do a good job. If not, I do think these guys are probably here for the long term. But, coaching staffs and the other people that are involved, like they can be thinking 5 years ahead. That no one lasts 5 years in the NBA. So what's kind of the calculus there?
Yeah, and that's one of the luxuries that Sam Presti has in Oklahoma City is that he's got maybe the most job security of anyone in the NBA, which allows him to kind of think this way. And, the deal they just made with Denver where they're trading a 2024 first round pick to get a 2029 one in that kind of hopes that, Denver is not going to be a contender by that point in the process. The farther you get out, in some ways, the more difficult it becomes because yes, like 3 or 4 years, I think we can assume that Phoenix is going to be kind of on the downside of this contention, and that's when their picks are going to be most valuable by, 2030, which hypothetically, if this trade is completed after the draft, you could have a 2030 pick swap in it. Then it's probably tougher to say what they're going to be. But yeah, I think you generally, when you're trading a star to a team and they're trying to contend right now, you want to push those picks out as far as possible. That's what Brooklyn did in that Kevin Durant trade where, they got every first round pick they could every other year, but the one swap they got was 2028 as far out as they could put it.
Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. Okay, last piece of this trade for the Wizards side of it. What do they do with Chris Paul? Because I think it's super interesting that there's precedent here. Chris Paul traded to Oklahoma City in the Paul George deal. Will Dawkins is there. They said, hey, man, we're going to try to get you somewhere else. They ultimately could not. He actually mentors SGA, and they make the playoffs, and everyone's like, whoa, okay, the Thunder, what are they doing? And now we see that they're obviously on the right track. Washington feels like they're in a little bit different scenario because they didn't get an SGA type player back. Chris Paul's too good at basketball. Like Chris Paul and Kristaps Porzingis, if they wind up playing together this year, are going to win way too many games for what the Wizards want to do. So if you're now looking at the next step, the immediate next step, what is it with Chris Paul and what are some of the likely destinations and what would be, I guess, an A-level return?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other difference between those two scenarios is at that point they were buying super low on Chris Paul coming off that injury plagued second season in Houston when everyone thought this was going to be the worst contract in the league. And then he has that great season with Oklahoma City that you mentioned, and they're able to trade him for a first-round pick from Phoenix and, some other smaller contracts they were able to reroute. So, that was part of it. I don't think at this age that Chris Paul is going, and obviously in the last year of his contract, he's going to rebuild his value the same way. So I think you are probably looking to see whether there's something you can do in the next 2 weeks, next few weeks, and then maybe considering a buyout for Chris Paul. The buyout doesn't do them much good this year unless for some reason they're able to trade, Kristaps Porzingis declines his player option, or they're able to trade him into cap space and then they actually have some cap space to add to, then a buyout becomes more favorable. But I think there's also probably just, doing Chris Paul a solid, letting him go where he wants to play this season and hoping that, whether it's in terms of currying favor with agents or karmically will come back to you in the end.
All right, last Wizards adjacent thing, kind of this trade. There was rumors over the weekend. I don't know how legit they were. I never saw like a Woj level person tweeting this, but like Porzingis and 8 for Portland's 3. Any chance that happens, or is that just like incredibly wishful thinking on Washington's end? Because it just feels like the number 3 pick in this draft, as good as Porzingis is, and 8's not a bad pick, that feels like not enough.
Agreed. And the other challenge there is matching salary. I mean, I think Porzingis in Portland makes a lot of sense. It would be a different
I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, like Myers Leonard, and they drafted Zach Collins to be a stretch 5 for them. Didn't work out because of injuries. Like Porzingis would be a totally different level. It's interesting. Neil Olshey was in charge of the front office at the time. They were a team that brought Porzingis in for a workout, even though they didn't have a lottery pick. They were a playoff team at that point, because I think of how interested they were in Porzingis and how far back that had gone back under the old regime. But Yusuf Nurkic makes like half of Porzingis' salary. You'd have to send out Anthony Simons as a starter in return to make that happen.
Bring him on. But also, that's why Portland's going to be like, hell no.
Exactly, yeah. From a value standpoint, it doesn't make sense for them.
All right, Kevin Pelton, guru of the trade grades, with us here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. What the hell are the Suns doing? Like, they needed to get better. I don't think Bradley Beal makes them significantly better, and he certainly does not make them better in areas where they are struggling. He scores, he doesn't play a lot of defense. Is that why you give the Suns a D?
That's a factor in it. I do think, like, we've seen Bradley Beal can be a good defender when he's really motivated at that end and doesn't have to carry the kind of 34% usage load that he often did in Washington after John Wall's decline. So, I have some hope for him in that regard, but the fundamental problem is he's one player. Like, the Suns' problem against the Denver Nuggets was that they could not get 5 players they trusted at both ends to put on the court. And granted, Landry Shamet was one of those guys, but you're a team that has depth issues and you're trading 2 for 1 again. Like, that doesn't, and for someone whose salary makes it impossible now for them to add anyone making more than the veterans minimum this offseason unless they are able to trade DeAndre Ayton for someone making significantly less. And if that trade existed, I think they would have already made it. I don't think that market for Ayton is out there. So you're looking at, again, trying to cobble together, I think, a 5th player, and with a lot of challenges. Maybe they can get some minimums to sign up. But to me, the comparison is the other trade the Wizards made recently when they sent Russell Westbrook to the Lakers. Same thing, where they were forced to build out their roster with a bunch of minimum salary players around a couple of, a handful of stars that struggled to stay on the court. I don't think the fit will be as bad with Beal in Phoenix as it was for Westbrook in LA, certainly, but some of those same challenges at a higher level apply.
Yeah, it's just, and the other thing is that I guess I was reminded of, we don't deal with no trade clauses often in the league. Mm-hmm. Like, Beal keeps the no trade clause, and that's something that is pretty remarkable. Is like, you don't waive it and then you get traded and then the new team can do whatever they want. He waives it for that specific trade. It's not like if it doesn't work out, where Westbrook, the Lakers were able to flip him again. They're stuck now with this core and with that second tax apron and all the things that are coming in with the new CBA that are incredibly restrictive. I know the cap's going to jump, but having 3 guys making $750 million is just not the way that the rules tell you in the modern NBA that you should be building a roster.
Exactly. I mean, we spent the last couple of months talking about the doom and gloom for the teams that were subject to the second apron in terms of, the Warriors and the Clippers. And for the Suns to willingly subject themselves to this is pretty shocking to me. I mean, I think the defense of this trade, or the argument for it that a lot of people have made, is, look, Bradley Beal is the best player they could have gotten for this. And they obviously did get him at a relatively low price, given they didn't have any first round picks to trade. But the question isn't who's the best player you could have gotten. It's what's the best team you could have built. And to me, that involved taking that Chris Paul contract and, slicing it up into multiple contributors.
No, 100% agreed. On the same page there. Kevin Pelton, ESPN.com. If you want the full breakdown of the trade, go there and get your trade grades on Kevin. Great stuff, sir. And I'm sure we'll talk to you in free agency.
All right. Thanks as always for having me.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.